He interrupted her funeral to blame me for her death. You saved money. She paid the price. Then my son turned his back and walked out, before I could say a single word. And I didn't stop him. I didn't need to. The chapel was dead silent, not from reverence, from shock. Some mouths parted, unsure whether to gasp or pretend it hadn't happened. I stood there at the podium, one hand on the edge of the wood like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The casket was behind me, closed. Margaret hated open caskets, said she didn't want people remembering her like some dried-up husk, said she wanted them to remember her alive. And she was, right up to the last week, still sharp, still kind, even as the cancer turned her bones to ash. The plan was to tell a story about her, something small, her laugh, the way she used to press her cold feet to mine in bed just to get a reaction, something human. But instead, Daniel made her funeral about me. He always had that talent, twisting a knife and calling it honesty. I stayed where I was for another 10 seconds, longer than I meant to. But when your son accuses you of killing your wife in front of a room full of people, you lose the right to rush. Eventually, I stepped down. The pastor tried to cover it with some Bible verse about mercy. A few people cried. Some didn't. When it was over, I shook hands, hugged a few necks. People looked at me like I was made of glass, either afraid I'd shatter or hoping I would. But I didn't break. Margaret's sisters rode with me to the cemetery, quiet, tight-lipped. When the priest lowered the box, I felt my ribs seize like they were trying to hold something in. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. I'd done enough bleeding in front of people. That night, the house was a tomb. The casseroles, the flowers, all of it sat untouched in the kitchen. I stared at the ceiling in our bedroom, my bedroom now, and let the memory of her last breath stretch out longer than it should have. I saw her hand, curled and cold in mine. I saw her eyes when she told me she was tired. And then I heard Daniel's voice, loud as the slap it should have been. You saved money. She paid the price. I got out of bed and went downstairs, pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer where we kept coupons and appliance manuals. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote exactly 6 words. Silence isn't forgiveness. It's remembering everything. The next morning, the obituary was still open on the counter. A photo of Margaret smiling in her garden, her hands stained with dirt, her hair tied back the way she used to do when she didn't care what anyone thought. That photo almost broke me, not because she was gone, but because he turned that smile into a casualty. Daniel hadn't spoken at the hospital, not when the doctor gave us the final scan, not when Margaret signed the hospice papers. He hadn't even helped carry her body bag down the stairs. He just stood there, staring at his shoes. I didn't push him. I thought maybe that was his grief. Now I know better. It wasn't grief. It was contempt. Margaret and I had a choice in the end. We could have paid out of pocket for the private care home in Asheville. State-of-the-art, full-time staff. Expensive, yes, but sterile, cold, impersonal. And she begged me not to die like that. So we brought her home. I used what savings we had to rent a hospital bed, hired a nurse part-time. I fed her with my own hands, bathed her, cleaned her. And Daniel? He visited twice. Once to argue with the nurse about her pain meds. Once to suggest we sell the house early and use the money for better care. When Margaret died, he didn't even stay the night. And then, 6 days later, he stood in that chapel and told the world I'd killed her with my frugality. No one called me after that, not even the pastor. I think they didn't know what to say, or maybe they thought Daniel was right. Maybe they thought I had saved money, and maybe I did. But what he never saw, what he never cared to ask, was that Margaret chose the way she died. I didn't save money. I saved her dignity, and that's not something I'll ever apologize for. 1 week after the funeral, I received a letter. No return address. Thick envelope. Formal seal. Inside, legal documents stamped, signed, and finished. Half of Margaret's estate. Moved. Not to a memorial fund, not to a hospital foundation, but to something called the Margaret L. Ward Family Trust, with Daniel listed as sole trustee. I'd never even heard of it. At first I thought it was a mistake, some bank mix-up, but the more I read, the clearer it got. This wasn't a donation. This wasn't about legacy. This was theft, dressed in legalese. The documents were dated 10 days before Margaret passed. Her signature was shaky, like someone with tremors had tried to stay steady. But it was hers. That cursive M always looped too wide. It was real. A power of attorney form sat underneath, filed, notarized, executed weeks before her last breath. A signature from a notary I didn't know, witnessed by one of Daniel's colleagues from his law firm. Buried in the fine print was a single line. Full fiduciary control granted to Daniel A. Ward in the event of cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. Margaret was sharp until the end. We did the crossword together the night before she slipped into her final sleep. She joked about me never finishing it without her. Even then, even dying, she was thinking of me. Daniel had done this while she was still alive, and he hadn't told me, not once. No heads up, no conversation, just a cold legal shuffle behind closed doors. And now he'd locked half her assets behind a wall of paper. The trust? Irrevocable, untouchable, permanent. I called the number listed on the filing form, reached a man named Jacobs, slick voice, too cheerful. Yes, Mr. Ward, I helped your son draft the trust. Lovely man. So committed to preserving his mother's memory. I asked how much Margaret knew about what she was signing. Oh, I couldn't say, but she seemed content. You know how these things go. Yeah, I do. I know exactly how these things go. I hung up without another word. Then I went to my file cabinet, bottom drawer, pulled out an empty manila folder, and wrote in block letters. The war. He asked for. Inside it, I placed the trust documents. Then I went to the printer, dug through my phone for a recent text, and printed that too. Daniel had sent it to me the morning after the funeral. No apology, no clarification. Just this. You always told me to trust family without needing paper. Now I'm just doing what you taught me. I stared at the line for a long time. That phrase had been mine. A lesson I gave him after he graduated from law school. Back when he still respected me. Back when he hadn't decided I was just a wallet with a bad back. I printed that message, put it in the folder. On the back of the page, I wrote one sentence in red ink. Then let's see how well you remember the rest of what I taught you. The thing about trust, real trust, is it only works if both people are afraid of breaking it. Daniel wasn't, and that told me everything. I sat with the papers spread across the kitchen table Margaret and I once shared. The same table where she used to clip coupons while sipping peppermint tea, where we planned our 40th anniversary trip, where she cried when Daniel got accepted into Georgetown. Now it was covered in betrayal. I looked through our joint accounts, cross-referenced what was missing. Margaret's stocks? Gone? Her pension rollover? Liquidated. It had all been folded into that airtight trust, disguised as a tribute, legally insulated, morally rotten. The money wasn't the point. It was the method. He waited until she was dying, until her voice was too soft to challenge him, and he moved fast, too fast for her to realize what was being taken. Or maybe, And this was the thought that wouldn't leave me. Maybe she did realize and stayed quiet to protect me. That night, I pulled her quilt tight around my shoulders and sat in the dark with only the sound of the wind through the chimney. I imagined her voice, low and calm. Don't fight him. Let it go. But then I remembered how she looked when she was angry, and that voice came back differently. Don't let him wear my name like a costume. That's what the trust was. A costume. A way for Daniel to wear Margaret like a mask while bleeding her legacy dry. No, I wasn't going to scream or storm his office. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to build, one brick at a time. And when it was done, he'd see exactly what happens when a man gets too clever with someone who taught him everything he knows. 3 days after I filed the trust papers into the manila folder labeled "The War He Asked For," Daniel lit the first public match. It came in the form of a Facebook post. A smiling photo of him and Margaret, her face pale, clearly taken in those final weeks, draped in a blanket I recognized. The caption read, "I paid for my mother's final care. My father thought she wasn't worth the bill. Below it, she deserved better. Family first. Do better, Dad." The comments started slow. A few of his work friends chimed in. "She raised you better than that, Daniel. Proud of you, man. Real men step up. Your mom's legacy lives on through you." Then strangers joined in. Dozens, hundreds. The post caught fire. His followers, mostly legal types and family fair influencers, took it and ran. People shared their own grief stories. Others pointed their fingers at me, the stingy old vet who let his wife die without dignity. I was a coward now, a miser, a relic from another era who refused to pay for comfort, even in death. Within 2 days, our small town knew. The pastor didn't return my calls. My neighbor, Don, crossed the street when I stepped outside to get the mail. Even the barista at the corner coffee shop handed me my cup like it might explode. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't defended myself. And that silence to them was confession. But inside my house, things were not silent. Inside, I was archiving. I downloaded the Facebook post, screenshotted every comment, tracked the accounts, followed the public shares, printed everything. I made a binder, labeled it Exhibit A. Daniel hadn't just posted a lie. He'd built a stage. And what he didn't realize was that I had the lighting rig, the sound system, and the master key. Later that week, I went to Sunday service. Not because I believed I'd find peace there. God and I have had an understanding since Vietnam. But I needed to see the damage up close. The church foyer was always bright, the smell of hymn books and floral perfume thick in the air. Normally people would nod, smile, pat my shoulder. This time, eyes slid sideways, a few tight smiles, mostly silence. When I passed the prayer board near the altar, I saw it. A fresh note, scribbled in blue ink on the pinned card. Pray for Daniel Ward. May he carry the burden his father refused. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. The pastor's sermon was about compassion that day, about sacrifice. He never said my name. He didn't have to. When the service ended, I didn't linger. Just shook a few hands, stepped back into the crisp air, and walked home alone. Back in the kitchen, I opened the folder, added a sticky note. Even God's house has its politics. That night, I received an email. No subject line, no greeting, just a screenshot. It was Daniel again, this time on LinkedIn, of all places. A post filled with buzzwords and branding fluff. In honor of my late mother, I've established the Margaret L. Ward Memorial Fund, supporting end-of-life care for families in need. We're starting local, growing national, because no one should have to die without dignity. Over the image, a black and white photo of Margaret, smiling faintly, next to a button that read, "Donate now." Below, a list of donors, familiar names, clients, church families, a few lawyers I'd known back when Daniel was still in school. I clicked through to the website. It looked clean, professional. Even had a small video of Daniel standing in front of a hospice center, speaking earnestly about transparency and mission. No mention of me, of course, just veiled shots. Too many families rely on outdated ideas of manhood, equating silence with strength, frugality with love. We must do better. It was strategic. It was cold. It was war. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for the notebook I kept beside the coffee pot. Wrote 2 columns. Left, website, video, donor list. Right, real timeline, signatures, paper trail. Then I made a 3rd column. Witnesses. Daniel wanted this fight to happen in the court of public opinion. Fine. But real trials? They happen in places with facts. And those places were where I planned to go next. The mail arrived the next morning. Inside, a thick catalog envelope from a local nonprofit network. On the cover, Daniel again, his hand on the shoulder of a palliative care nurse. Big title over his head, "How One Son Turned His Mother's Death into a Movement." That was the moment something in me shifted. Not just anger, not even betrayal. It was something colder than that. A realization. He wasn't grieving. He was branding, and he was using her death as his pitch deck. I stared at that glossy photo for a long time, my eyes scanning every pixel. And for the first time since the funeral, I smiled. Not out of satisfaction, out of recognition. Because I finally saw him, not the son I'd raised, the man I was about to bury, not in a grave, but in the truth. The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. Daniel never left things unsecured. He'd once given me a lecture about basic risk management when I forgot to lock my truck in his driveway. Said thieves weren't just criminals, they were opportunists. So when I stepped into his house and the deadbolt hadn't even been turned, I knew it wasn't carelessness. It was an invitation. I hadn't seen the place in over a year. Back then, it was cold, colorless, hardwood floors, matte gray walls, a couch you'd never dare nap on. Everything in Daniel's world was curated for optics. Today, the air felt different, tense, like the drywall itself was waiting for something to happen. "Daniel?" I called out. No response. I stepped further inside. Silence. No TV. No echo of a phone call from his home office. Just the faint hum of the fridge. I walked past the kitchen, past the hallway that led to the study, and into the den. That's when I saw it. The coffee table had been cleared of its usual minimalist stack of business books. In its place sat a single sheet of printer paper. On it, a map of our old house. Not his, mine. The layout was unmistakable. Same dimensions, same hallway, same back porch. A red marker had circled one room in particular, the master bedroom. Underneath it, drawn in thick slashes, was a crude heart, stabbed straight through with a jagged black pen. My throat went dry. Beside the map was a photo, one I hadn't seen before. Margaret, sitting on the front porch, a blanket around her legs, smiling. But the smile had been desecrated, 2 red slashes drawn through her eyes, and another across her chest, exactly where the pen stabbed through the heart on the map. Below that, a note, block letters, shaky, almost carved into the paper. "You're next, old man, but first, confess." The silence in the house sharpened. It wasn't just emptiness anymore. It was threat. I didn't move, didn't touch the paper, didn't speak. I just stood there, long enough to let the chill creep up the back of my neck and settle in my spine. Then I stepped back into the hall and pulled out my phone. I dialed. 911. What's your emergency? I kept my voice calm. There's been a break-in, maybe a threat. The dispatcher asked for details. I gave her the address. She asked if I saw the intruder. No, but they left something. I hung up after giving my name. When the officer arrived, I was standing on the porch. Tall kid, fresh uniform, nervous eyes. Mr. Ward? I nodded. Inside, I said. But before we go in, I have a request. He blinked. I want you to look, but I don't want you to file a report. That got his attention. You're saying you want this off the record? Yes. Sir, if someone's threatening you, they're not threatening me. They're watching. His brow furrowed. I stepped aside and let him in. He did his job, took photos, bagged the note, studied the map like it was some kind of deranged blueprint. He asked the usual questions. Any recent disputes? Suspicious people? I said no. I didn't mention Daniel. Didn't mention the trust. Didn't mention the fake charity or the viral post or the photo of Margaret with red lines across her face. I told him what I needed to. Nothing more. After 20 minutes, he gave me a look halfway between concern and confusion. You sure you don't want to pursue this? I'm sure. He hesitated. If anything escalates, I'll let you know. He left, and I locked the door behind him. Back inside, I sat in Daniel's office chair. It smelled like aftershave and control. I looked around. His law degrees were still mounted on the wall. His bookshelf was arranged by color, white spines at the top, dark ones at the bottom. A single photo of him and Margaret sat in a frame on the corner of the desk. She looked alive in it, really alive. The kind of smile you get when you're not posing, probably from before law school, maybe undergrad. I picked up the frame and turned it over. Under the backing, I felt something uneven, taped behind the glass. I peeled it off. A receipt for a private courier service, overnight, 1 week before Margaret died. Recipient, Daniel Ward. Sender, Margaret Ward. It was real. She'd sent him something, privately, while I was in the next room, cooking soup and pretending she wasn't fading. My stomach turned. I didn't know what it was, but I knew what it meant. She hadn't told me everything. She'd sent something to Daniel, something important enough to deliver directly. And whatever it was gone. I slid the receipt into my coat pocket and stared back at the photo. The silence in the room returned, thick as smoke. And I whispered, more to her than to him. You deserved peace. He'll give it to you, in his own way. He arrived 3 days later. No warning, no call. Just the familiar sound of tires on gravel and the slow groan of my gate opening like it still had a choice. I watched from the window, the same spot Margaret used to stand when expecting company. She'd fix her hair, press her lips together, and say, "Let's pretend we're still the kind of people who host." Today, no one was pretending. Daniel stepped out of his car with a paper bag in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. He was wearing a navy peacoat and that tight, purposeful smile he always used when trying to charm judges, or lie to me. I opened the door before he could knock. "Dad," he said, voice light, too light. "Thought I'd stop by." He held up the bag. "Brought food, from Milligan's, your favorite." I let him in without a word. The house smelled like lemon polish and boiled coffee. Margaret's rituals, resurrected more from muscle memory than grief. Daniel walked into the kitchen like he hadn't posted my name to a digital firing squad 2 weeks ago. He set the bag down, started unpacking without asking. "Pot roast, mashed potatoes, pecan pie," he said, glancing at me over his shoulder. They still make it the way Mom liked. I pulled out a chair and sat down. He poured the wine. I didn't reach for a glass. We ate in silence for a while. Well, he ate. I pushed the food around. My stomach wasn't interested in nostalgia. Halfway through his second bite, I saw it. The sleeves of his shirt pushed up slightly, revealing angry, raw patches on his wrist. Not cuts, burns. The kind you get from cigarettes or from pressing skin to metal out of rage. He caught me looking and casually tugged the cuff down. "So, how have you been?" he asked, as if the past month hadn't happened. I didn't answer. He filled the silence with a sip of wine and a forced chuckle. "You know, for what it's worth, that post wasn't about you. Not really. People just read into things." I raised an eyebrow. "You wrote, 'My father thought she wasn't worth the bill.'" He didn't flinch. "Just a way to express frustration," he said, "about the system, about how broken things are." I leaned back. "And the trust?" He shrugged, fork scraping the plate. "You always told me family didn't need contracts." She was still alive. She was declining. She was breathing. His fork stopped. "You don't get to do that," he said, voice hardening. "Don't get to act like you were some kind of saint. I was there too." "No," I said. "You were around. Big difference." He stared at the pie like it had personally insulted him. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I wonder what it felt like," he said softly, dangerously. "What?" "Dying. Slowly. In pain. While your husband watched and didn't do a damn thing." The words didn't land like bullets. They landed like acid. Slow. Corroding. I didn't answer. He nodded, satisfied, as if my silence confirmed something. Then he stood, brushing off crumbs. "Well, thanks for the chat. We should do this more often. Feels like progress." He picked up the wine bottle, half empty now, and turned toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. "I hope you're not still angry," he said without looking back. "She's gone. What's the point of blame?" He left without waiting for a response. The screen door banged shut behind him, and then he was gone. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, staring at the food cooling on the plate, the red ring from the wine glass bleeding into Margaret's old table runner. Then I turned toward the photo of her on the mantel, still smiling, still soft, and I whispered, "You deserved peace. He'll give it to you, in his own way. Not as comfort, not even as justice, but as a mirror." Because one thing Daniel had never learned was that poison doesn't just kill, it circulates, and some of it always ends up back in the glass you poured it from. Grief makes people sloppy, not the grieving kind, the performative kind, the kind that turns sorrow into currency. Daniel had always been meticulous, but in his rush to bury the truth and sell the tragedy, he forgot one thing. I still had friends, real ones, the kind who remember what you did during a monsoon in Da Nang, the kind who return calls no matter how old you sound. One of them was Jim Langley, a former Navy JAG turned estate lawyer. Quiet man, quiet power. I called him one morning and asked for a favor. "I'm not filing anything," I said. "Not yet." Jim chuckled on the other end. "You just want me to look under the rug?" "Yeah, and tell me what's crawling underneath." He got to work. 2 days later, I met him at his office on Danton Street, same place I signed my first will 30 years ago. He looked at me with a sort of tired sympathy, the kind of look men give each other when the bullets come from inside the house. "You're not going to like what I found," he said, handing me a folder. Inside were copies of documents, IRS forms, state filings, fund registrations, all under the name the Margaret L. Ward Memorial Trust Fund. I'd seen that name before, but this was the engine underneath. The guts. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Jim tapped the top form. He filed for 501c3 nonprofit status 6 weeks ago. Got expedited approval. The trust is now legally a charitable organization. I stared at him. And? "And it's fake," he said. "The board members don't exist. Their addresses are either P.O. boxes or empty lots." He flipped to the next sheet. "The donations you see on the site? Circular, meaning he's donating to the trust from shell companies he controls, then writing it off for tax benefits." "He's laundering his own money," I said flatly. Jim nodded. "In the name of your wife." I closed the folder. My jaw was tight. My palms hadn't sweat like that since the day Margaret flatlined in her sleep. "What else?" Jim hesitated. "He's using the fund to pay himself a salary, modest on paper, but he's also filed for reimbursements, travel, client meetings, speaking engagements, all through the trust. All through her name," he confirmed. I didn't speak for a long time, because there was nothing to say. He hadn't just stolen from the dead. He'd monetized the grief, polished it, packaged it, and built a future on it. Jim slid over another document. A few of these forms were signed using power of attorney. "The same one he used before she died," I said. "Yeah. It was supposed to be temporary. Not anymore." He tapped his pen on the table. "I'll help you, Thomas, but if we go public, this gets loud." "I don't want loud," I said. Jim raised an eyebrow. "You don't?" "No." I picked up the file, slipped it into my coat. "I want precision." That night I sat alone in the garage. The lights were off. Just a single bulb swinging above the old workbench Margaret used to call my thinking corner. I opened the file again, page by page. Reimbursement receipts for hotels I'd never heard of, dinners I couldn't pronounce, flights marked conference that landed in Vegas, Miami, New York. He was living off her death, and not in the poetic, grieving widow way, in the cash back, rewards points kind of way. He hadn't just betrayed her memory, he'd branded it. I ran my fingers over the folder's edge and whispered out loud, almost involuntarily, "You sold your mother's name to save a few dollars." I folded the folder shut, then added, "Let's see how cheap that was." I started building my archive. Each document got scanned and backed up to 2 drives, one in my safe, the other mailed to Jim. I printed every screenshot of the trust's website, every ad, every testimonial from families claiming to have been touched by Margaret's story. None of them were real. One of them even used a stock photo, a woman in a wheelchair, smiling beside a nurse who'd apparently been used in 4 other websites, one of them for a dental clinic. Daniel hadn't just faked grief. He outsourced it. I cross-referenced every listed donor, every event, every board name. I built a timeline. 6 months before Margaret passed, he filed a preliminary business license. 3 months before, he drafted the website. 1 month before, he transferred her pension into the trust. And 1 week before she died, he launched the campaign. The same week I was sitting beside her, reading her chapters from that mystery novel she never finished. The same week she smiled through morphine and whispered, "You don't need to save me. Just stay." While she said that, he was in front of a green screen studio recording an awareness video. When I finished building the archive, I labeled it Exhibit B, Ghost Fund. The name felt right, because Margaret was in every line of it, every form, every fraudulent dollar. But she wasn't present. She was just leveraged. And now, she was going to be the reason it all collapsed. Not because she asked for revenge, she never would have, but because Daniel thought her memory was soft, romantic, safe. He forgot the woman who once slapped a man across the face at the grocery store for cutting in front of a pregnant stranger. The woman who made me promise on her last lucid night that I wouldn't let him use her to clean up the mess he'd made. Well, he did. Now it was time to clean up mine. I invited him for a drink. No pretense, no fake reconciliation. Just a short message. Whiskey. Friday night. Just us. He responded within 5 minutes. Finally. It had been nearly a month since our last conversation, if you could even call it that. A month of silence, shadows, and planning. I knew the kind of man Daniel had become, but I also knew the kind of boy I'd raised. And boys like him, they couldn't help themselves. They always needed the last word. Friday arrived with a cold front. Sharp wind, dead leaves scraping the porch. I cleaned the kitchen, lit a single candle, and poured 2 glasses of Glenlivet. Not the good one, just enough quality to tempt nostalgia. I set the bottle between us, unscrewed the cap, and let it breathe. Then I slid the recorder into my pocket. Small, black, 1 button. I clicked it once, felt the vibration in my hand. Live. Daniel showed up 10 minutes late, not because he was busy, but because lateness was a kind of dominance to him. His suit was charcoal, unbuttoned, no tie, casual, but expensive. "Nice to see you finally drinking again," he said as he stepped inside. "I didn't say I'd drink," I replied. "I said we'd have a drink." He chuckled, took off his coat, and sat. He didn't toast. He didn't ask questions. He just drank. And then he waited. "Why now?" he asked after a moment. "You mean why invite you?" "Yeah." I swirled the liquid in my glass. "Because I've been thinking. Maybe I did fail her." He looked at me sharply. I leaned forward. Maybe it was easier to bring her home because I couldn't stand watching her die. Maybe I couldn't bear the smell of bleach and loneliness in that hospice. Maybe saving money was a convenient excuse. He raised an eyebrow. "That's what I've been saying," he said, a smile twitching on his mouth. "You did kill her. Not with poison or force. With neglect." I didn't react. "I heard her," he went on. "That night I visited, the last time. She begged you to let her stay in the hospital. She was scared. You said, 'No, we're not wasting the money.' That's what you told her." I said nothing. Daniel leaned back, emboldened. "You made me feel helpless," he said, "watching her waste away while you sat in the next room reading magazines like it was just another Sunday. You did nothing. I hated you for that." "You still do," I said. He nodded, eyes burning. "I do." There was a long silence, the kind that settles in your bones. Then I asked, "So that's what all this was? The fund, the website, the campaign?" Daniel blinked. "I gave her name purpose," he said. "You buried her in the ground. I made sure she stayed alive. By stealing half her assets. They weren't hers anymore. I had power of attorney. You kept it after she died." He didn't flinch. "I protected her memory. And yes, I took what was mine. You were never going to give it. You taught me that, if you want something, take it before someone else does." I nodded slowly, then asked softly, "And the trust? What about it? The fake board members, the shell companies, the recycled money, you know, the crimes." That finally broke his rhythm. His eyes flicked toward the whiskey bottle, then back to me. "I cleaned it up," he muttered. "It's legit now. Still started dirty. So what? The whole world runs on dirty starts." Then he looked me square in the eye. "You wanted a confession? There it is." I didn't blink, because I didn't need to. The recorder had already captured it all. He poured himself another glass. I didn't touch mine. "You happy now?" he asked. "No." He smirked. "Didn't think so." He stood, fixed his cuffs. I'll see myself out. He walked to the door, paused before opening it. One day when you're gone, they'll remember me as the one who did something with her name. And with that, he left. When the door clicked shut, I didn't move. I let the silence sit with me. Let it wrap around my shoulders like Margaret's quilt used to on cold mornings. Then I pulled the recorder from my pocket, clicked it off, set it on the table. For a long time, I just stared at it, that little device, that simple red light, and the truth it held. He thought he'd taken everything from me, my money, my name, my wife. But in the end, he gave me the one thing I needed most, his voice. 1 week later, I sent the package. No return address, no warning. Just a plain brown envelope, carefully sealed and dropped into a mailbox at the edge of town. Inside, a USB drive. On it, the full recording of Daniel's confession. Clear, unedited. His voice pouring out venom over whiskey, admitting everything. The fake trust, the shell companies, the power grab, the theft. Accompanying it were scanned IRS forms, the nonprofit filings, the phantom board members, copies of the donation receipts that led back to businesses Daniel had created months before Margaret died. Some registered to his office, others to a condo in Chicago I knew he never visited. And the final piece, screenshots of the now viral social media post, the one that turned the town against me, with the caption that had started it all. My father thought she wasn't worth the bill. I didn't send it to the police. I sent it to the press, 2 local journalists, 1 state level, and a nonprofit watchdog group known for exposing charitable fraud. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The truth would walk itself in. The first headline dropped within 72 hours. Grief for sale. Son exploits dead mother's name for profit under fake charity. It included everything. The trust documents, the voice recording, the falsified nonprofit, even the forged testimonials pulled straight from stock image libraries. It quoted Daniel's words directly, lifted from the audio. I made sure she stayed alive, not in memory, in money. The backlash was immediate. His LinkedIn account disappeared within hours. The website for the Memorial Trust went offline the next morning. And then the emails started, from people I hadn't heard from in years, old neighbors, veterans from the VFW hall, even a woman from our church who once refused to pass me the offering plate after Daniel's post. Now, they all had something to say. I'm sorry. I didn't know. We were wrong. She'd be proud of you. I didn't answer a single one, because this wasn't about redemption. It was about restoration. By the end of the week, the national press picked it up. CNN ran a brief segment. Charity or scam? Lawyer under fire for profiting off mother's death. Fox News followed with their own spin. Veteran father defamed by son in exploited grief hoax. Daniel's photo was everywhere. So was Margaret's. Her smile, used by him to build an empire of sympathy, now floated across millions of screens. Only this time, the narrative had changed. She was no longer a martyr in a son's campaign. She was a victim of it, a symbol of what gets lost when mourning becomes marketing. The fallout hit fast. Daniel's law firm issued a statement. We are deeply disturbed by the allegations and have placed Mr. Ward on administrative leave pending investigation. Donors to the trust demanded refunds. The IRS opened a case. A cease and desist order was filed against the fund. The board members were traced, every name fake, every signature manufactured. Even the flag from Margaret's funeral, the one he'd posed with for the foundation's promo video, was requested to be returned by the hospice care organization he falsely claimed to support. I watched it all unfold from the same chair I'd sat in when Margaret died. Same candle, same silence. Only now, it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of vindication. That Friday, I walked into town for the first time since the post went viral. The same barista who once handed me my coffee like I was diseased now smiled with red-rimmed eyes and said, "It's on the house, Mr. Ward." I nodded, said nothing. On the walk back, someone honked from across the street. I didn't wave, just kept walking, my spine straight, my coat buttoned. I passed the community bulletin board and saw the flyer for a canceled event. Fundraiser for the Margaret L. Ward Memorial Trust, canceled due to legal dispute. The paper fluttered in the wind, half torn. I stopped, tore it the rest of the way down, folded it, placed it in my coat pocket, not out of malice, out of record keeping. The world was correcting itself, not because I begged it to, but because I handed it the mirror, and the reflection had been undeniable. Back home, I pulled the folder labeled "The War He Asked For" from the drawer, slipped the flyer inside, then opened the smaller folder marked Exhibit C, The Leak. Inside were copies of the articles, the headlines, a photo of Margaret beneath the updated caption, "The Woman Behind the Lie." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because some wounds aren't meant to leak anymore. They're meant to scar. And scars? They're proof you survived the story someone else tried to write for you. He was fired within the week. The firm didn't hold a press conference, didn't issue a long apology, just a quiet line buried in the local legal journal. Effective immediately, Daniel A. Ward is no longer affiliated with Grant & Lewis LLP. That was it. 16 years of law, gone in one sentence. The fallout didn't stop there. His license was flagged for review by the state bar. His bank accounts were frozen pending audit. The so-called Memorial Trust was stripped of its nonprofit status and placed under federal investigation. His name, once tethered to charity, now floated beside words like fraud, embezzlement, and malice. But the thing that truly broke him wasn't legal. It was visual. The hospice flag came home. It arrived on a Tuesday. No knock. Just a cardboard envelope slipped through my mail slot. No return address, again. Just a printed sticker that read, "Property of Faith Haven Hospice. Recovered from unauthorized use." Inside, the folded triangle of American cloth, crisp and sharp. The same one they'd placed on Margaret's casket during her final rites. The same one Daniel held to his chest for the Memorial Fund launch video. Now it was mine again. Returned. Uncontaminated. I didn't hang it right away. I waited. 2 days later, I visited the VFW hall, retrieved a shadow box frame I'd ordered months ago and never used. I placed the flag inside. Beneath it, I added a plaque. Simple. In memory of the truth she lived, and the price he paid to lie about it. Then I mounted it in the hallway, the one Daniel used to run through barefoot, giggling like a fool when Margaret chased him with a wet towel for knocking over her plants. Now it belonged to her again, and only her. The town moved fast to rewrite its stance. The pastor who once dodged my calls left a voicemail. "Thomas, I can't imagine what you've gone through. If you ever need..." I deleted it before it finished. The church sent flowers. I left them on the porch. People stopped crossing the street to avoid me. They waved now, smiled with lowered eyes. Some came by to check in, their voices full of concern, their hands full of apology pies and casseroles. I accepted them all, with silence, because forgiveness isn't always verbal. Sometimes it's letting them feel the weight of what they believed too easily. I heard Daniel had moved out of his penthouse, sold his car, closed his social media accounts. Even the office he rented downtown, empty. His name scraped off the glass, his desk gutted, just a stain on the carpet where the chair once sat. His wife had left too, took the kids, moved to her sister's in Ohio. Publicly, she said nothing, but privately, someone forwarded me an email she sent to a friend, the kind that travels through the whisper circuit. I don't know who he is anymore. I think maybe I never did. I didn't smile when I read it, didn't gloat, because collapse isn't about victory. It's about gravity, and gravity always wins eventually. Weeks passed. Each morning I woke up earlier, walked farther, sat longer with Margaret's photo. Her expression had changed in my mind. Less sorrow, more steadiness, like she was watching, not weeping. I'd been angry for so long I forgot what stillness felt like. And now there was peace. Not joy, but peace. I still missed her hands, the way they moved when she folded laundry or stirred soup. I missed the sound she made when she was half asleep and trying to convince me to turn off the radio. But I didn't miss the shame. That had been buried alongside Daniel's version of her. For good. One morning, I received a final letter. No return address again, but I knew the handwriting. Daniel's. Tight, controlled, too clean to be honest. I opened it at the kitchen table. I hope you're proud. You made them think I'm crazy, evil. You made them think I stole her, but you're the one who didn't fight for her when it mattered. You won. Congratulations. The world believes your story now. There was no apology, only accusation, only bitterness. I folded the letter, filed it in the manila folder marked collapse, the last page, the last sentence, and then I closed it for good. That night I poured myself a drink, sat by the window where Margaret once watched the seasons change. The flag on the wall was still. The house was quiet. No reporters, no rumors, no masks, just truth, laid bare, and I whispered, not to her, but to the silence. He wanted me to confess. Instead, he confessed everything. 3 months later, he came back. No letter, no lawyer, no warning. Just him, thinner, quieter, worn down by the weight of something too complex for even his pride to carry. I saw him through the window before he knocked. He stood on the porch for a full minute, breathing like each second was a negotiation with his own ego. When he finally lifted his hand, the knock was soft, almost childlike. I opened the door. We stood there a moment, both of us caught in a silence that didn't know where to land. He looked different. The expensive watch was gone, the shoes scuffed, his hair unkempt. The fire in his eyes, smothered by something he hadn't let anyone see before. Consequence. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like the house might bite. His eyes flicked around, at the photo of Margaret, the quiet living room, the folded flag mounted on the wall in its glass frame. He froze when he saw the plaque beneath it. Read it twice. His jaw tightened. "You put that up for me?" he asked. I looked at the flag. "No, I put it up for her." He sat down at the table without invitation. I didn't offer coffee, didn't offer comfort. I just stood across from him, waiting. His hands fidgeted in his lap. Finally he spoke. "They think I'm crazy." "Who?" "Everyone." I didn't respond. He laughed, not out of humor, but because the silence made him uncomfortable. "I lost my job. My license is under review. Melissa left. The kids won't answer my calls." Still, I said nothing. His voice turned bitter. "You proud of that?" I met his eyes. "No." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not proud," I said. "I'm tired." He leaned back in the chair like I'd hit him. "I didn't plan for it to go this far," he said after a while. "The trust, the fund, I just wanted something that looked like control." "But it was never about control," I said. He nodded slowly. "It was about being seen." Another silence, then softly, You always saw her, not me. There it was, the truth, raw and ugly. The resentment he'd buried under lawyers' polish and charitable lies. I was always the son who got in the way, he said. You sat by her bedside every night and I just watched you choose her again. I sat down across from him, not because I forgave him, because I understood him. Is that why you used her? I asked. To make her yours? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The shame was already in his eyes. He stood up after a while like the weight of the chair was too much. Walked toward the door, then stopped. You could have destroyed me, he said. I didn't. No, he admitted. You just let me do it myself. He reached for the doorknob, then paused. Are we done? I thought about that. About Margaret's voice in the quiet mornings. About how she once told me, some wounds don't close. They just stop bleeding. I looked at Daniel. You turned her name into currency, I said. I gave it back its dignity, in full. He didn't speak, didn't nod, just opened the door and walked out. I followed him only far enough to watch him step off the porch, his frame smaller than I remembered, as if the truth had shrunk him. I closed the door behind him, locked it, then walked back to the hallway, stood in front of the flag, ran my hand along the glass. There was no pride, no relief, just stillness, the kind Margaret always brought with her when the storms passed. On the wall, beneath the flag, the plaque read, "In memory of the truth she lived, and the price he paid to lie about it." That was the last chapter, the real one, and it belonged to her again. Not him, not me, just her, at peace.